Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Wednesday, September 6, 2023. It is 9:03 a.m. This session is set to go until 10 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Vice Chair Ty Menser in the boardroom, as well as Commissioner Gary Edwards. We also have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and is Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder in the boardroom?
Commissioner, the Assistant County Managers are not in the room.
Oh, they're not. Okay. I couldn't see the corners. But today we will be discussing the American Rescue Plan spending update. And am I passing it to Nicole?
Yeah, Nicole is ready. This is just the monthly update related to the American Rescue Plan expenditures and allocations based on the decisions the board has made. At this point, we're not asking you to make any specific decision. I don't think we have any requests. We only request, as you stated, Madam Chair, I believe on Tuesday or last Thursday, I can't remember, is where the Regional Housing Council related to the High Street operations. You briefed the board on the Regional Housing Council conversation, and also you briefed the board that perhaps you will, the board may consider a request when the Regional Housing Council provides a more sustainable way to manage the operations of High Street, not just 1 year. So that's the only thing that's pending, but not to be decided today. Today is just to give you the status of the funds.
I can barely hear Nicole. Nicole, can you speak up?
Yeah, I think it's the mic. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Perfect. Thank you.
Nicole Martinez, Budget and Fiscal Manager. I'm just going to hand it directly over to Diana to run the PowerPoint. So I'll share my screen, and then Diana, you can go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Nicole. Good morning. Let me know when you can see the screen.
Okay.
Okay, next slide, please. So as Ramiro mentioned, this is the every other month American Rescue Plan Act update. Today we'll be presenting current expenditure information. We'll be covering some information about some new use categories which were made available during the 2023 interim final rule, and going over some ARPA performance measures for some of our ARPA projects, looking at the current allocation, and there is time reserved for potential ARPA projects discussion. Next slide. Currently 52.1 million of the 56.4 million award has been approved for specific projects. This is 92%, with about 8% remaining in earmarks under consideration. That's 4.4 million. Current expenditures are at 22.7 million, which is 40% of the award. As a reminder, the award must be spent or obligated by December 31st, 2024, with final obligated expenditures occurring by December 31st, 2026. In December, with the Consolidated Budget Act being passed federally, new use categories were made available for American Rescue Plan Act funds in the last couple of weeks. May I continue?
Yes, please.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In the last couple of weeks, Treasury has released an interim final rule, which I believe has been published to the Federal Register, and a final rule will be forthcoming. The previous rule that we've been referring to as the final rule is now known as the 2022 final rule. This is the 2023 interim final rule, and it provides 3 new eligible use categories for these funds. The first is emergency relief from natural disasters, and that is just what it sounds like. One note is that we're not able to use funds for expenditures that other things are going to cover, for example, FEMA. The second use category is surface transportation infrastructure, and this is in line with certain U.S. Department of Transportation programs. And the third use category is for Title I projects, which are community development projects in line with HUD's Community Development Block Grant Program. Robin, did you want to add anything to that information?
No, but it looks like Commissioner Edwards might have a question.
Yes, ma'am, I do. Is this new eligibility spending
That's correct.
we're allowed? Is that what we're hearing here?
Yes, and that became available to us, I think, in December or January. We knew about this.
As of the bill signing, which was at the end of December, we're able to use the funds for these three categories. And the same deadline applies, except for surface transportation, a new deadline applies of
Earlier.
September,
So-
September 30th.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. So we have known about these, and you may recall we mentioned them a few months ago. We looked at these if I see you're thinking about something specific.
Well, I would, if we're gonna have this briefing and we're gonna be making decisions, I would like to see some examples that other jurisdictions are doing that fall within those particular guidelines, right up to the edge. I wanna go right up to the edge where we can stretch it to wherever that may be to accomplish our needs. I mean, we've got some real problems in our budget, and I'd like to know, well, would this work or something like this? This is what some other county is
Sure.
doing, or.
We can look at these, but I think one of the keys around these is the emergency relief from natural disasters. For us, that's fires, floods, windstorms, and nothing that FEMA would pay for. So that's there's not a lot going on in this county that we would use that money for at this time. The surface,
Well, let me ask you a question.
go ahead.
But would it be eligible for preventive maintenance to address those type of things? Whether,
Possibly,
you know, maybe it's a upgrade for an earthquake or
yes.
something like that, that we could tie in with some of our ongoing projects that we're going to do anyway. So just,
Yes, it
let's
could.
stretch it a little bit.
But in that respect, once you hit infrastructure, there's a slew of infrastructure rules, not saying we can't follow them, but you have to do a study that determines that what you're doing is the best feasible project. You have to show the percent of that is relatable to COVID. There's still a lot of things that you have to prove, but yes, we could do preventative type things for that portion of a project.
Okay, I'm gonna grab one, just,
Sure.
what about the building over at the fairgrounds? We utilized that property extensively for dealing with the virus. And so,
Huh?
okay, another virus coming, they're talking about that, let's get the building ready, let's do it. Now,
Huh?
are we gonna use that for something besides that? Well, sure, we're not gonna let it just sit there empty, but let's free up our other monies for somewhere else that we can use them, and use
Right.
some of this money for something that's preventable and preparing for those particular issues that we have to come.
So that would not be allowable with under like the natural disasters or the CDBG. It's not eligible under natural disasters because again, we're talking about fires, floods, windstorms, earthquakes.
Or viruses.
Viruses, so we looked at the fair building under the virus and that only the portion, it has to be proportionate. So we would have to determine to what extent that building would be used in the future for a virus, and you could only pay that share, so it would actually be a very small percentage of the
I
building.
have to disagree. I think we could stretch it considerably. And heck, the Justice Department isn't even going after the criminals that have been abusing receiving this money. They're not gonna come after us if we just go, hey, we don't know what the next disaster is, so we wanna have a prepared location.
So interestingly enough, we recently got a notice from the Office of the Inspector General at the federal government that they are indeed doing reviews. And Brandon sent us a notice that it is highly probable that if they find unallowable costs, they will be requiring jurisdictions to pay the money back.
That'd be hard for
So-
us to do, cause we don't have any money.
So they
Exactly.
are.
So I think the point is, the staff, the only thing that we can do is bring you proposals. They're bound by the regulations that are put in front of
Yes.
us. I don't think staff will be in the position to put the board as well as the county at risk for any potential payment into the future. So that's really is not a viable option. We look at approval of this building, I do believe the fairgrounds building serve a purpose. The old building, they help us manage the testing as well as the vaccination sites. That was absolutely a perfect location. But we demolished that building. Right?
Yeah,
that-
so we better put
so-
another one in its
but
place.
we demolished the building in the intended purpose to change totally different use. So, and I think that's
No,
probably.
I never demolished, I never knocked that building down so that we could not use it to help our community. So when you say we had a plan or whatever, I don't buy that. I think we gotta look into everything that's possible.
I'm not saying we have a plan, is the Fair Board has a plan about this building, not me.
The Fair Board is only advising the board.
Yeah.
That's all they're doing.
Right, yeah, so it's not my plan.
So-
I know it's not your plan. I'm just saying,
As-
I think we have ability to make some stretches, but
As
I
far-
won't beat that horse to death today.
As far as the proportionate nature that I talked about, that is from your internal auditor. So it's documented and we would have a hard time,
What's
with an
coming
audit.
new could be completely different than what we dealt with. And we don't know that, so if we can do preparation, I think we need
We
to.
can't build a
I'm-
whole new building to prepare for a new.
Well, I'm maybe
plan.
not. Maybe it'll offset what we're doing or something. All I'm saying is we can always stretch. Anyway, end of that.
All right.
tirade. Thank you.
Keep going, Diana, next slide.
Sure, I just want to note that that we're aware, Commissioner, of your interest in funding that building, and if there's any possibility to do so and stay within the rules, I would let Robin and Nicole know right away if we were to find that was the case. So we have some information to present to you on some of our projects that we've been working on over the last couple of years, performance measures, results. And so the first project we're going to look at is the Thurston Business Relaunch Project. That was a project to award grants of up to $10,000 to Thurston County small businesses, which show proof of economic hardship caused by the pandemic. Our partner, the Economic Development Council, administered this project, and we distributed more than $1.8 million in grant funds to 191 small businesses. This slide shows the distribution by business sector of the grants which were distributed. And so these business sectors, and this analysis was done by the Thurston Economic Development Council as part of our research project. And you can see that the majority of the funds went to sectors like the food and beverage establishments, professional, scientific, and technical services, ambulatory healthcare services, food and beverage stores, and personal and laundry services. The next project we're going to look at is the Minority Enterprise Investment Project. And this was also a grant project. Grants of up to $10,000 were awarded to Thurston County BIPOC-owned small businesses, which showed proof of economic harm. And we awarded over $1.3 million in grants to 131 small businesses through this project. The distribution was quite similar by business sector as the other grant project, with food and beverage establishments receiving the majority of the grants, personal laundry services, professional, scientific, and technical services, going all the way down to educational services and clothing accessories retailers. The next project we're looking at is the nonprofit organization grant project. And this was a program to award up to $20,000 to Thurston County nonprofit organizations, which showed proof of economic hardship caused by the pandemic. And again, our partner in this project was the Thurston Economic Development Council. We awarded just about $810,000 in grants to 49 Thurston County nonprofits. This is a look at the grant distribution by nonprofit sector. And this grant was targeted at social assistance organizations, with funds also being received by performing arts, spectators, sports and related nonprofits, civic and professional organizations, museums, historical sites, and smaller similar institutions. And the next project to look at is the Agricultural Market Grant Project. This was a project to award up to $10,000 to Thurston County agricultural businesses, which showed proof of economic hardship caused by the pandemic. And our partner in this was the Thurston Economic Development Council and the WSU Extension Program. $484,000 in grants were distributed to 50 different agricultural businesses. And we also, as part of this project, distributed almost 40,000 pounds of food, the equivalent of about 3,200 boxes of food to Thurston County families. The distribution by business sector of the agricultural market grants, the majority went to crop production, followed by food manufacturing, animal production and aquaculture, and then beverage and tobacco product manufacturing. Although I think these business categories were categories the EDC selected. I believe that most of that was actually beverage manufacturing.
Yeah, Romero's got a question.
Hey, Diana,
Yeah.
tobacco product manufacturing, do we have something like this in Thurston County? Just
Sorry, could you please repeat your question?
tobacco product manufacturing, or this is just overall category?
I would need to double check with the EDC, but I think that these are established categories that they use for analysis
Not
of this
necessarily-
type.
Okay, it could be beverage.
Probably
That's
on
right.
the
It's closer
beverage
to the
side,
beverage.
not the
got it,
tobacco
yeah.
side, yeah.
Right.
That's correct.
It's a sector.
I should also add the EDC is finalizing their first year research report, and these results will be also available within that report. The next project we're going to look at is the Thurston Works Jobs Program. And this was a project to create job opportunities. It was a dual benefit project, which benefited Thurston County nonprofits who received a worker. And then the workers for the project were either unemployed or underemployed workers. This project was administered by the Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council, PAC Mountain, and the Community Foundation of South Puget Sound. 24 employees received jobs through this project, and 18 nonprofit businesses received employees. So some nonprofits received more than one employee. And this is a look at the 18 different nonprofits who received workers for a year through this project. I'll mention just a couple. For example, Grub, Garden Raised Bounty, Habitat for Humanity, Harlequin Theater, the Olympia Family Theater, as well as the Olympia Film Society, Puget Sound Estuary, South Sound YMCA, the Food Bank, and Homes First. The next project we'll look at is the Small Business Startup Project, also known as the Target Zone Startup Grants. And this project awarded 10 grants of up to $100,000 to cover costs to transition a business from concept to market. This project was administered by the Thurston Economic Development Council through the Center for Business and Innovation. And we received information that 9 of the 10 businesses have opened and 1 is yet to open. And the sectors of businesses include admin and support services, ambulatory healthcare services, food and beverage services, building construction, educational healthcare services, and social assistance. I'd like to add to that previous information that those 9 businesses which have opened they're still open. And the next project we'll look at is the Thurston County Food Bank Infant Formula and Diapers Project, which was the project to purchase and distribute infant formula and diapers to families in Thurston County. It was administered by the Thurston County Food Bank, and they were able to distribute almost 105,000 diapers and more than 64,000 ounces of infant formula to more than 6,500 Thurston County households.
And you may recall that that was at a time when it was hard to get infant formula. So this was an extremely successful effort.
The next project is the Substance Abuse Monitoring Project. And this is a project to provide home monitoring in lieu of pre-sentencing incarceration. And we're doing that through a contract with Friendship Diversion Services. And 250 individuals have been supported with SCRAM and 85 with UAs. And we've had an average of 300 people monitored per month from January through today. This project reduces the pressure and costs on the incarceration system. It's not a one-to-one impact, but it's a reduction.
Well, I do have a question on that.
Mhm.
Well, we just gave more money to.
For this project,
Yeah, to the courts, but
right?
I didn't think it came from ARP.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
ARPA funds.
Yeah, ARPA. You've authorized ARPA through the end of this year, and in the budget for next year is a request for additional funding, and you'll need to determine the source of that. Because this program, which you authorized as a pilot, which is going very successfully, the challenge will be, it's an ongoing program, should you so choose, with ARPA is one-time money. So the question is, will you invest in the future of this project? And if so, what the funding source will be?
I thought the courts were just complaining about they were losing access to home detention or whatever you want to call it.
The court, if you talk about Superior Court, has lost access to home monitoring because the jail is not operating that program at this time. This program that you're looking at here is through District Court, and we funded it by ARPA.
Why couldn't we do the same thing? for
You
Superior
absolutely
Court?
could do the same thing. So if the goal is reducing pressure on the jail, and we know that
That
the
would be the
jail is
goal.
having continuing issues with COVID, then we could do that.
One of the, really, I think you keen on perhaps a long-term objective for the county is to really have a program that deals with this type of tool. The home monitoring devices, it not necessarily be housed in a specific court, it's just to the system itself.
Right.
And that is something into the future, that will be a program that can benefit the system itself. And I think that's what probably you're looking for, not necessarily just getting, district court and the non-felony type of cases that can utilize this, because the need is on other areas.
Right.
So how we can probably bring this programmatic tool to make it available to the system, that it will be a good conversation in the future.
Right, absolutely. And part of the this program's the structure of the program, if you will, is that it's operated on a contract with Friendship rather than operating by the sheriff's corrections program. In the past, home monitoring has been a program offered by the sheriff, and they're no longer doing that due to staffing pressures at this time. So do we go back to having the sheriff restart the program? If they're able, do we go with a contract? That's all part of the conversation.
Yeah, sure worth talking about.
Right,
Aren't
I
we
agree.
still, don't we have something still in there in our budget for adding on to the jail potentially? Is that-
no, no, that money was used for other things because the
Something
board was
still in
not
there.
interested in expanding the
The
jail.
flex unit?
Yeah, I think for the flex unit.
No,
or
that-
something.
Yeah, that's,
I thought something was
The
still.
you all
board-
voted that down.
Right, we did, but,
And took a different direction on the available
but
funding.
this type of activity assures that we won't need that, that's all.
True, so the question is, how do we restart this activity? The sheriff's not offering, when COVID began, I'm sure you recall, at the start of COVID, they shut down the home monitoring, the day release program and work release. All of those are not currently operational, and they haven't started up again, mainly because the sheriff does not have the staff to be able to cover those programs. So the board never defunded them, if you will. But the programs are not operational. District Court has now started up this home monitoring program with ARPA funds. And again, the policy question for the board is, how do we move forward with this on a county-wide basis, not only for District Court? And do you do it on a contract basis? Do you work with the sheriff to restart it there? If you were to do that, how do you address the staffing issues? I mean, there's a whole lot of policy questions involved in this, as well as where does the ongoing money come from? Part of the success of this program is the 300 people monitoring every month do not pay into it. When the sheriff was running the program, all participants had to pay a share of the program cost, and that was a barrier that stopped people from joining the program. So part of what we might want to weigh is what is the revenue and how much of the cost does that actually offset compared to what's the cost of having them sitting in the jail.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, Diana.
Thank you, Robin. So that was a look at some of our key projects, performance measures. As Robin has mentioned previously, our 2023 Thurston County recovery plan is posted to the Thurston County website if people would like more information about these projects and the performance measures we've collected. We'll be updating that plan annually. And then the next piece of this is a look at the allocation. You also should have before you the allocation spreadsheet as well. Expenditures have been updated through August 31st. As I mentioned, 22.7 million of the award has been spent and 4.4 million remains under consideration.
Should we be looking, sorry, Diana, should we be looking at the sheets that are separate and not the ones that are in the packet? Is there a difference? There is a difference, but I don't know what it is.
Sure. This look on the slides is a roll up. So some of these projects, like for example, the United Way project is rolled up into one project here. But in your packet, you should have a listing of all of the different pieces that are part of that project. And likewise, the lost revenue here on the slide is just listed as one project. But in your packet, I believe you should have a line for each part of the lost revenue project.
Is 2.34 BE?
Expanded, those gray lines are an expansion of the white line above it.
But that's here
Those are
too.
blue. So turn the page.
Which page? This page?
Yes. And you see how United Way is broken down into the various parts.
So look at this one, don't worry about this.
Either is fine for the conversation this morning, but if you want more detail, this one will give it to you.
Okay.
For example, if you wanted to see the different parts of the lost revenue project, that's there in your packet, and the different things which have been allocated and the expenditures which have gone through for each.
So if we were looking at the one that's been kind of a question mark from the beginning is the court backlog pot of money, like $8 million, and then we allocated $1 million, and then we allocated, looks like we've spent 1.9, which allowed what we approved 5 point. Can you walk me through that?
Sure. The screen is just slightly too small. So can someone read the current allocation there? It's a little bit fuzzed out for me for the court backlog project.
Yeah, so the court backlog, the amount approved is 5.8 million. We've spent close to 2 million. And it looks like 4 is left.
So we have a projection that we created when we came to you to request approval of those funds, which includes the staffing for that project through 2024 and the costs for the lease for Chandler Court through 2026. And the lease is significant through 26. It's most of those funds.
Yes, so as Diane said.
3.8 million left in that. Is that what you're saying, Nicole?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And we project that we will use all of that.
By the end of next year.
By the end of 26.
26, which includes the lease.
Staffing through the end of next year, and then the lease for Chandler Court going on through 2026.
Is that the only thing that's eligible into the end of 2026, is the lease payments?
So the staffing costs are in a gray area. I think that we could make a case.
Stretch?
Yes, I do think we could stretch.
Thank
We've
you.
had many conversations amongst staff on whether or not that's the case. But I do believe that we could make a strong case to make staffing eligible. The costs after the end of 24 must be obligated. And I think the way that we set up, our employees sign employment letters, and these particular positions have end dates and are directly tied to COVID. So if the board were to extend the end dates to the end of 26, and we signed that revised employment letter, I think that we could make a case that those funds are obligated and keep the staff on.
Yeah, and we were exploring that because the word obligation in this case means a contract.
Okay.
That we need to have a contract in place. In order for us to continue to pay the lease in Chandler Court, we already have a lease contract that will allow us to pay beyond 2024. And the staffing levels, we're exploring that because if that letter, I believe that is a contract, and it
Yes.
should meet the intent of that.
Right, so that is something that we've looked at. I think that whenever we talk about staff, it's in the gray area and we could make a case. Other things are a little less stable. Yes, Commissioner.
So are we discussing the, I guess, the amounts that we set for the COVID backlog? Because for the COVID backlog.
For the court backlog,
Uh,
yes, that is exactly what we're talking about
And-
right now.
Because I do have some questions, right? I know that there's been some issues with recruitment of some of the positions, specifically on the attorney side, right? And I know right now what both prosecutor and public defense is doing is they're kind of monitoring, like, or they're kind of setting the time of, when an attorney works on a case, they're setting that time and charging it to this. But
my question is, those weren't the only positions. I know that the courts also had a position. And so I'm wondering how that position has helped with the backlog as well. I understand the attorney's side of it, but I'm curious about that position as well. I know that there were two. One was a jury one, and that was to handle the situation at Chandler.
Right.
But then there was another position as well, and I was unclear on how that,
A program manager.
how that circled back and.
So, great question, Commissioner, and in fact, we organized a meeting this Friday to get an update on the overall core backlogs. So each office and department who is receiving this funding source should be able to tell us what are they doing, because it is key. Every single attorney, and just to pick an example, who works on that core backlog, then needs to log the time associated with reducing the backlog of those cases. So, and that's what we need to go through, make sure that is the case, and hopefully we can provide you with additional information after Friday's meeting.
Thank you. And let's see.
So I'm understanding Commissioner Mejia's question. Are you saying that that position didn't ever get filled?
Well, no, it did get filled, but I'm wondering how it kind
If
of,
it's helping?
yeah, how it connects to the, I'm just curious more than anything.
Program manager?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was to help on the case, backlog cases. But one of the strings attached to any new positions that were created to do the backlog, they needed to log their time to make sure that was on cases related to the backlog, no general cases. COVID-19 backlog, may say.
We'll check on that.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Other questions about where we're at with the money? You'll see that on the affordable housing line, that is line 2.15A, that there's the 600,000 still set aside. As you move forward with the consideration of Quid Street, it's in there. Should the board not do that, then that's available for something else.
What's that dollar amount?
That's
600,000.
600,000. On two.
Line item 2.158.
Before you leave that
Yes.
item, so 4.3, 600, 800,
We've only spent 825,000. That was our share of the down payment or the payment for the
Foundation.
property. And then we're entering the 3.5 million contract with City of Olympia to continue with the housing on that
That
property.
agreement should be coming for your consideration here in the next couple of weeks.
Yep. We're working on that contract. It's not spent yet, but it's available for that contract specifically.
how about all these big public utility projects? Are they gonna be Hamisham, Boston Harbor?
Right.
Is that all gonna be obligated on
We-
time? And
We knew that those would be down to the wire, if you will. We have been working with Public Works to ensure that those projects are moving along. The costs that you see spent, I think, are pre-design. And the schedule that we've received from Public Works has the construction contracts obligated by the end of next year and spent by the end of 26. They are currently on track. So you'll see that not a lot under consideration column is earmarked, if you will. The 600,000 for affordable housing, which you're considering a specific use. We still have under 2.36B for the agricultural support, the 500,000. We've just launched that pilot. We need to see how it goes. But the 500,000 for that is still in that category under consideration. If the pilot works well and we can move the project, then that's still there. And then the other large amount under consideration that's earmarked is under 5.21A, that's for broadband, 1.9 million. And then we also have just under 700,000 earmarked for admin, because we're trying to sort out exactly what is and is not still eligible in that category that might come up in the next year. And then you have 639,000 that is not earmarked for anything at this point and available to you for other things. Yes, Romero.
I'd like to go back to the broadband project. And the board may recall that you set aside this amount to support the larger project that Nisqually Tribe had across the areas of the county. And obviously this amount that you set aside, it was not going to build that project. It was seed money for the Puyallup tribe to get some grants at the state level. They submitted a grant. I think it was a great submittal, a great proposal. However, they did not receive the grant. And right now, I believe the Nisqually tribe is challenging the results of that.
They did not receive.
They did not receive. So this money cannot be utilized because that was predicated on the Nisqually tribe to secure the grant in order to build the project. So at this point, that project is unknown as to how it will materialize in 2024, if that is the case. So this will create an opportunity for the board to look and reallocate that.
And how many dollars is that?
It's right here, it's in line item 5.218. So you have set aside a 2,600,000 approved, and you also have under consideration another 1.9 million, and we have only spent 502,000.
So we have that under consideration amount, is that almost 2 million? Is that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it might be worthwhile to get an update from Jenica on the status of
She's ill
this.
today, so she couldn't attend, but
Right.
So that's what is something for you to keep track on that. That perhaps this project may not materialize in 2024, which will put in the position for the board to reallocate the funding.
$2 million that we'll need to spend quickly.
Where are we on bonuses for our employees that we've been kind of talking about hanging back because of negotiations or something? I'm not sure exactly how that works. But
Right.
why couldn't we, first of all, what's that dollar amount? And then why couldn't we go ahead and get that out to folks, even though we have not concluded our negotiations? We already know
Right.
that we're gonna do something. Why not do it?
So that's under the lost revenue category. And if you look at the page in your packet, rather, yep, that
This
one,
Yeah.
that's gonna tell you exactly how much was set aside. I don't have that in front
Which
of
one of the
me.
pages has it got on it?
Which is the expanded one.
Six
You
point
won't
one
have it.
eight.
There you go.
6.2?
6.1A
Page 3 of
is lost revenue, and the employee bonus is there. The board certainly could issue the bonus at this time to those employees who have not received it yet. But recall the conversation in executive session with your HR staff. And I'm not gonna say anything more about that
Fine.
session, but that was
That was
the conversation that, yeah.
Right, but, I mean, we don't seem to be solving that particular problem very fast. So, a lot of folks, we have to, I think we should always be thinking about how we can make our employees feel loved, I guess, I'll just put it that way. Because retention and recruitment is gonna remain a big issue for us for years to come. And if every little thing that we can do to help solve that problem, I think is worth doing. And if we're running into time constraints, let's do it and get it over with and get on to the next thing. 'Cause we're gonna do it anyway, I think, but anyway.
I think, I don't disagree with you. But I think what we're waiting on was the budgetary discussion is basically what it came down to. And that's kind of why
Coming up next
Monday.
week.
coming up next week, and
Next week.
that's why there was,
Okay.
yeah, just because we had that discussion and, for that discussion, there were some decisions that needed to be made. And that's why we decided to wait until we actually saw the overall picture of that.
Where's the broadband again?
That is, line item 5.218.
Oh, I see it.
Two.
So 2 million was approved. We've only spent half of it. And I had a question when you were talking about the grant. So so did their grant include a full commitment of this? No, okay. And now they didn't get that grant, so we may be in a position to not be able to spend it in that way.
What page is that on?
That is on
Three.
page 3 of it.
The last line item under 5, category 5.
The first report that you're looking at. That one.
This one here, page 3.
But what would be the,
There's 3, 5.2. I got it right there.
what would be the things that could be done? I mean, the needs that we have don't fit under any of that. I mean, employee bonuses have to be done with lost revenue.
That's right.
Auditors building has to be done with
Lost revenue.
not ARPA.
And we maxed out the last revenue allowance.
Yes.
So we've got a new category of CDBG type projects, which are low income community development projects, but I don't have anything sitting at the top of my head that, you know, that we've been trying to fund.
You know,
That fits
we,
into that category.
in the back end, and we provided a little bit of what we have in our back pocket, because absolutely, you're right, we're not gonna be leaving any money on the table. So the options will be to invest in infrastructure,
Roads.
roads, and those, because they already have contracts, we can just use some of the ARPA funds.
Except, with one of the things we recently learned is that the, surface and transportation items, come with non-supplant rules. So if we already had it under contract, then we've got funding for it that we can't
But it
supplant.
could be probably a contract, next year, we're gonna have a sizable overlay program. And it's gonna be bidded in the summer of 2024. That was probably where you can capture.
As long as we don't already have funding for it.
And so, at NACO, I went to, one of the sessions was in regards to ARPA. And there was kind of, and county manager, I showed you this, where they kind of, and I sent it to Jenica as well, where they, again, just taking it as idea gathering, I don't remember from the top of my head any of the specific projects, but there were several, and maybe, and this is something that, it's just a tool where it has all the different projects laid out that other jurisdictions have done.
Yeah, that we could take a look at.
And that we could take a look at, and maybe there's something that we didn't think of, that we were like, okay, maybe we can fit it in, and this will help alleviate something next year.
Yeah.
So I'll send that.
Please send it to us, yes.
If,
and- Go ahead.
That
If-
gets to Commissioner Edwards' point.
if roads are infrastructure, why aren't buildings infrastructure?
So buildings are infrastructure, but there are specific rules in the final rule that say that it cannot be spent on general government buildings. So there are prohibitions against us doing certain things with the money, even though buildings as infrastructure can be considered.
Well, we just name it something else. I just don't see that we can squeeze those definitions down so tight that we can't say, well, it's gonna be used for this, public health, whatever it's gonna be used for. And make it fit. I don't care what we call it. We can call the upside down Jones building. I don't care. But if it fits, let's do it. Let's figure a way to make things work.
And then we would need to use it that way.
Well, we would use it that way. We would use it for, not every day, but we might use it to put people in and keep them warm at night, for our first sub-freezing weather.
So once you start saying we won't use it that way every day, then we have to figure out how many days and it's proportionate. So that gets back to that. All right,
But
anything else?
I thought that new rule specifically was surface transportation infrastructure.
Yes,
So it's
yes,
not
we
just
can do,
infrastructure.
that's exactly right. The new rule is 3 specific categories: response to natural disasters, the surface and transportation, and CDBG. So the CDBG is the category we thought might be a little more broad. We looked at CDBG for the fairgrounds, we looked at CDBG for the Mottman, and they don't fit. They
It's
do
the low
not fit.
income element, right?
Low income,
There's the low
exactly, because
income
it's-
and
That's the key, is the CDBG has to
Yep.
be low income.
So the rules around those 3 new areas is that there are certain federal programs already in existence. And if your project would qualify for one of those and you don't have the money, like with the FEMA one, the natural disaster one, it can't be something that FEMA pays for, then you can use ARPA money on the project. And with the surface one, it's very strict non-supplantation rule.
What was the COVID situation called?
What do you mean?
Wasn't that a natural disaster?
No, that was a pandemic.
What, I mean, it was a natural disaster.
It was a disaster, all right.
It
but
was a
that's
disaster.
different
And
thing, yeah.
I don't think we ought to be locked in on.
So again,
definitions and type.
yeah. Yes, Commissioner, you're still.
Oh, well, I had a question on supplant. So in the situation of roads, we've got a 20-year, a 6-year, I mean, we've got a capital
Mhm.
improvement, a road transportation improvement plan. So we always have this plan to do a whole bunch of projects, just a matter of funding. So
Right.
when does the supplant thing kick in?
So the supplant thing kicks in if you have an award from the state or the federal government or some other local entity, or an appropriation of county funds, then the money is secured for that project.
So being on
It's
the plan
considered
doesn't matter.
available.
We went ahead and put
That's
it in the
right.
budget.
That's right. If it's budgeted, or if you have the money to sign a contract, because you shouldn't be signing contracts that you don't have funding to pay for. So we could very well look at something that's like 4 years out that, we don't have the funding available now, it's not appropriated, and we, we got it on the plan for if we're ever so lucky as to get grants,
But why even
we
4
could
years
move
out?
that out.
Why not
I'm
2
just
years
saying,
out?
any number of years.
Yeah, but I mean,
So
it's just,
for example,
it's just everything on the list that just hasn't already been like,
we
the
got money
board
for
budgeted
this,
it.
right?
Which at
We've
this
got
point in
money
our
for
cycle
this.
is like almost nothing. Cause I would think that most stuff's been done and we're about to think about a
Yeah.
new set of things.
If it's in 23 and 24, we pretty much know where the money's coming from, even now.
But we haven't
uh,
made that decision.
I know you haven't made that appropriation, but the money's pretty secure for the next 2 years in our CIP. We can show you where the money's coming from. In that case, you can't replace it, but if there are other projects that we wanna pull up that we don't have an idea yet how we're gonna fund, then those are fair game.
But Commissioner Messer brings a good point. I mean, the board has not approved the CIP or the TIP yet. There is an opportunity for those projects, they can create a gap in funding.
Yeah. So the other,
I mean, you have the
no,
latitude, that's
no.
the thing, that's where probably your leadership.
no, they can't create a gap and meet the non-supplantation. You, that's, no, you can't. You can't just unfund something and say, hey, now we're gonna use this money.
Well, no, but we
That
haven't
is
funded
the,
it yet, that's what
that
I'm
is
saying.
the,
You guys
you
have-
haven't,
You guys have planned, and you can plan all you want, but until the board votes on the budget, it hasn't been allocated.
Yeah, I
So,
really
I can
think,
change my mind. I don't wanna fund Country Club Road Culvert. I don't wanna do an overlay program next year.
That's fair, I mean,
no, that's not,
'Cause we
that's
haven't
not how
voted to do it.
non-supplant works.
Really?
I,
Okay.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm saying, nope.
who makes up
Um,
these definitions of how it works or not? Is it?
Auditors and federal government rules and state laws, and there are a lot of things that come into play that we have to follow.
Let's get some kind of a legal determination wrote up that this is okay and say, well, we're just following a
maybe
legal
during the budget
determination.
conversations, we can take the time to bring the
Yeah,
definition of a supplanting.
we can certainly do that. So I think that there are some opportunities, but it's not, the definition of supplantation isn't necessarily tied to what the board's voted on.
Okay, well, that's good to know, and it's kind of a moot point, cause we've got a never-ending stream of projects, so it's just a matter of which one we would choose if we were in that position.
The other challenge with the transportation projects are which ones can be completed on time. So, you know, going for something that you haven't even started working on yet, can they really finish it by the, I think it's a September 30 of 26 deadline?
That's right.
Yeah. So that is all part of that. All right, are we ready to move on? We're about out of time. Go ahead, Diana.
Sure. Well, that brings us to what we've already been discussing, which is time for potential ARPA projects discussion. Did anybody have anything in particular they wanted to review?
I think in the interest of time, we can move on.
Okay. In that case, that wraps up our ARPA update for today. The next quarterly project and expenditure report will be submitted to Treasury by the end of October. And our next ARPA briefing is scheduled for November 2nd.
Yes, Romero?
Suggestion maybe to bring back for the board's consideration the Plan B.
Right,
I think it will be very timely in November to start gelling with Plan B because the time is coming. Or may need to implement some of the options on Plan B.
yep, good. We'll include that with the November 2nd.
There is one other comment I wanted to make. I believe this is our last ARPA update with Ramiro. And so many different people have really, had a part in these ARPA projects' success, the commissioner's vision and Robin and Nicole's leadership and Jenica's leadership, our community partners, the EDC and Pac Mountain. And as we did go over some of our results today, I also wanted to thank Ramiro for his leadership.
Thank you, appreciate it.
We are adjourned. Okay, so I just sent you the